Welcome, dear listeners. Tonight, let your thoughts drift gently as we take you on a peaceful journey. This is a space for calm, for quiet moments, and for the kind of stories that settle your heart and slow your breath. Make yourself comfortable, close your eyes if you wish, and allow the world to soften around you. Now, let's begin with tonight's story. Today's story is titled, The Pulse of Solmere, the Heart's Guardian. The wind was soft that morning, so soft that it barely rustled the curtains drawn halfway across the windows of Lyra's quiet city apartment. The light of dawn filtered through in pale streaks, and though everything around her was still, something inside her stirred. It wasn't loud, this calling. It was a whisper, an ache, like a forgotten memory brushing the edge of a dream. Lyra sat on the windowsill with her hands curled around a lukewarm cup of tea. She had been feeling this for weeks now, an unshakable restlessness, as if her soul had outgrown the boundaries of her current life. The city, once vibrant and full of promise, now felt like a cage. The emails, the deadlines, the predictable cycle of grocery runs and rushed dinners. It all pressed on her like too tight shoes. Then, as if summoned by thought alone, a message popped up on her phone. From Maeve. Her college friend, now living somewhere along the northern coast of Europe. The message was simple, but it struck like lightning. Come stay in the cottage, Lio. I'm overseas for 2 months. It's all yours. No cars. No stress. Just ocean, forests, and time. You need this. A smile cracked her lips. Maeve always knew when to appear. 2 days later, Lyra was on a train bound for the coast, a small duffel bag at her feet and a well-worn paperback in her hands. Her heart, once heavy, now fluttered with a strange sense of freedom. The destination, a small island called Solmere, nestled in the arms of the North Sea, reachable only by a once-daily ferry from the port city of Narrated. No one had heard much about Solmere outside of travelers and locals. It wasn't the kind of place featured on glossy brochures. It had no major attractions, no towering resorts, no trendy cafes. What it had, Maeve once said, was silence. And stars. When Lyra arrived at Narrated, dusk had already begun to lay its golden fingers across the rooftops. The ferry sat at the dock like a slumbering beast, its white and green hull gleaming faintly in the last light. Passengers were already beginning to board, families with ice cream sticky children, couples with hiking boots and backpacks, and a few solitary souls like herself, chasing some invisible tether. The scent of salt and seaweed filled her lungs. Overhead, gulls circled and cried, and the water lapped against the harbor walls with a gentle persistence that soothed her anxious thoughts. She stepped aboard the ferry and found a place near the railings, her eyes locked on the horizon as the engines rumbled to life. As the ferry pulled away from the mainland, Narrated shrank behind her, its lights blinking like fireflies in the growing dark. She felt something uncoil in her chest. The further they traveled, the more she breathed. It was a 90-minute journey to Solmere, long enough to lose yourself in thought, or in Lyra's case, to fall into a kind of meditative stillness. She watched the water turn from steel gray to deep navy, watched the occasional sailboat drift by like a ghost. Around her, children ran in circles on the deck, and laughter bubbled in the air like music. She thought about Maeve's stories about the whispering forests and the misty dunes of Solmere, about the little cottage tucked just behind a pine grove, its windows looking out toward the lighthouse that watched over the sea. Lyra pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. The breeze here had teeth, but it also had a kind of music to it, a distant hum, as if the sea was singing a secret just for her. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the rhythms of the waves and the thrum of the engine lull her into something between rest and dream. When she opened them again, someone beside her was speaking softly in a language she couldn't quite place words, fluid and melodic. She didn't understand the meaning, but it didn't matter. The sound was comforting, like wind in leaves or rain on old rooftops. Time passed like mist. And then, someone said it quietly, but with a thrill in their voice. There it is. Lyra stood, hands on the railing. In the fading light, a shape rose from the sea, a dark silhouette against the bruised lavender sky. As they drew closer, details sharpened, sandy shores curving like a sleeping serpent, dense clusters of trees, and in the center, high above it all, a cherry-red lighthouse that blinked once, twice. Like a heartbeat. She exhaled a breath she didn't know she was holding. Solmere. The ferry slid into the small harbor as if into a cradle. When the engines went still, a hush fell over the passengers. No one rushed. Everyone seemed to understand, instinctively, that this was not a place to hurry through. Lyra stepped off the boat and onto the worn planks of the dock. The scent here was different, sharper, cleaner, tinged with the resin of pine and something floral. She looked around, saw old stone buildings with moss-covered roofs, a crooked little food stand selling fried fish, and bikes, so many bikes lined up along the path. There were no cars. Maeve hadn't been joking. The streets were narrow, winding, and paved in uneven cobblestone. It felt like stepping back into a world that had somehow escaped time. She walked over to the fish stand, drawn by the smell alone, and ordered a paper cone of crispy golden bites. Cod fritters, the old man said with a grin. Fresh catch this morning. She sat at a nearby bench and ate in silence, staring out at the harbor, where the sea seemed to breathe in slow, eternal rhythm. Above her, the lighthouse pulsed again. And in that moment, full belly, wind in her hair, island soil beneath her feet, Lyra felt it clearly. This was not just a vacation. This was a beginning. A doorway had opened, and she had stepped through. The morning sun spilled across Solmere like golden syrup, sliding through the narrow alleys and over the gabled rooftops. The light felt different here, warmer, softer, like it had traveled a long way just to rest on this forgotten patch of earth. Lyra woke slowly, as if the island itself had woven a spell around her sleep. Her small inn-room smelled faintly of lavender and wood smoke. The windows were flung open, and a cool breeze teased the linen curtains. From somewhere in the distance came the low call of a seabird and the gentle creak of moored boats shifting with the tide. She stretched lazily and made herself a quick cup of coffee with the kettle the innkeeper had left. Maeve's note was still folded on the bedside table, with the simple hand-drawn map that would guide her to the cottage. "Rent a bike from Olin at the harbor," it read, "and follow the path through the pine forest. You'll know the place when you see it. Trust me." Lyra packed up her bag, slung it across her back, and made her way back down to the harbor where the rental shop stood like an old guardian of travel. Rows of bicycles lined up under a slanted tin roof, each one slightly different, some with baskets, others with child seats or quirky paint jobs. Olin himself was sitting on a stool, carving a piece of driftwood into the shape of a fish. He looked up with a kind smile when she approached. "You must be Maeve's friend," he said, eyes crinkling. Lyra nodded. "I was told I could borrow a bike." "Of course." He stood and gestured to the rows. "That red one there, she's sturdy and smooth. Good basket, good brakes. She'll take you wherever you want to go." The red bicycle had a woven basket at the front, leather handles, and a small bell that chimed softly when she tested it. It felt right. Like it had been waiting for her. She thanked Olin, who handed her a folded paper map and pointed toward a narrow road leading out of town. "The forest path begins just beyond the bakery. Keep to the left at the fork, there's a wooden marker carved with a seashell. That's your trail." Lyra pedaled slowly at first, getting used to the weight of her pack. The cobblestones clacked under the tires as she passed sleepy houses with flower boxes, a tiny bookstore with sun-faded spines in the window, and a woman setting out fresh bread behind the bakeries. Foggy glass. Then the village fell away behind her, and the road turned to sand and earth. She entered the forest. It wasn't dark. The pine trees, tall and ancient, let the light through in golden shafts. The path was soft beneath her tires, lined with wildflowers and bushes heavy with dew. There was a hush here, a living quiet, full, not empty. Birds sang in short bursts. A rabbit darted across the road. The breeze rustled the branches high above, like the forest was breathing. Lyra slowed her pace, letting the silence fill her. As she rounded a bend, the scent changed. Sweet pine sap mixed with something floral and distant, wild heather maybe, or dune roses. She stopped the bike for a moment, dismounted, and stood still. There was a wooden bench to the side of the trail, half covered in moss. She sat for a while, letting her legs rest and her thoughts wander. In front of her, the forest opened slightly, revealing glimpses of distant dunes through the trees. The sea wasn't visible yet, but she could hear its pulse. Constant. Ancient. She reached into her pack, pulled out Maeve's note again, and reread it. "If you find the old windmill ruin on your way, stop. It's not far from the cottage, and it has the best view of the eastern shoreline." Curious, she got back on the bike and kept going. The path narrowed and curved again, and then she saw it, a crumbling stone tower, draped in ivy, standing at the edge of a small clearing. Birds flitted in and out of the broken slats near the top. The windmill's arms were long gone, but the frame still stood tall and proud, as if guarding the land. Lyra leaned her bike against a tree and walked closer. Climbing the few steps of stone inside, she reached a platform that gave her a view unlike any she'd seen before. Rolling dunes stretched endlessly, dotted with violet shrubs and golden grasses, all leading toward a far-off sparkle of ocean. She stood there, heart full, as if the island had whispered her name. Then she heard the faint creak of wood. Turning back, she spotted a narrow trail veering off from the main path. It wasn't on the map, but something about it felt familiar. Drawn by instinct, she followed it. And there it was. Nestled at the edge of a glade, framed by tall grass and trees with silver leaves, stood the cottage. It was everything Maeve had described and more. The roof was steep and shingled in sea-gray tile. A weathered wind chime tinkled gently from the porch. The windows were adorned with green shutters, and a cluster of bluebells grew beside the stone steps leading up to the door. Lyra approached slowly, heart pounding not with fear, but something like reverence. She lifted the mat, found the key, and stepped inside. The scent of cedarwood and lavender greeted her. A small kitchen with copper pans. A cozy reading nook with a woven blanket. A fireplace, already prepared with logs and kindling. And on the table, a handwritten note in Maeve's elegant cursive. Welcome home. I hope this place gives you what it gave me: peace, wonder, and a bit of magic. Lyra sat down on the small couch, the light streaming through the windows and landing on her face. She closed her eyes and listened. Birdsong. The creak of trees. And somewhere far beyond the forest the rhythmic breath of the sea. For the first time in years, she let herself breathe with it. And in that moment, she knew, she had not simply arrived. Lyra awoke to birdsong. Not the sharp, mechanical chirp of city pigeons or the shrill cries of gulls scavenging trash, but the layered, melodic symphony of woodland birds greeting the rising sun. She blinked slowly, still cradled in the warmth of thick linen sheets, the scent of pine resin and ocean salt lingering in the air like a quiet promise. The cottage was bathed in morning light. Golden rays slanted through the window, casting long patterns of dancing leaves across the wooden floor. Outside, she could hear the gentle rustling of pine boughs swaying in the sea breeze and the distant hum of waves breaking somewhere beyond the trees. She stretched, pulled on her cardigan, and padded barefoot into the kitchen. The floor creaked with a familiar, comforting tone beneath her. Maeve had left a loaf of sourdough bread on the counter, wrapped in a clean cloth, along with a small jar of local honey and a wedge of hard cheese. It was the kind of breakfast that didn't need effort, just presence. Lyra poured water into the kettle and lit the old-fashioned gas burner. As it hissed quietly to life, she wandered to the front porch with a steaming mug of tea, letting her eyes drift over the forest clearing. The sky was streaked with pastel clouds, and the trees seemed to hum with quiet life. No meetings. No one expecting her to reply within 15 minutes. She could spend the entire day just listening to the world breathe. But something inside her urged movement. A fluttering sense of anticipation, like there was more to discover. After a light breakfast, she changed into her hiking clothes, slung her camera around her neck, and mounted her cherry red bike once again. The forest path she'd taken yesterday branched in several directions, and today she chose a different route, one that led west, toward the coastal dunes Maeve had once described as sandscapes from another world. The trail wound through thickets of silvery underbrush and fields of tall dune grass that swayed like waves in the wind. Sunlight glittered off grains of sand, making the entire world look dusted in gold. As she pedaled, time unraveled. Hours melted like morning mist. She passed moss-covered signposts with names like Whispering Bluff, Seal's Rest, and Hollow Cove. Every turn seemed to lead to another hidden world, a crescent beach here, a rock-strewn trail there, a glade carpeted in yellow heather. Eventually, she reached the crest of a particularly steep dune and dismounted. The wind tugged gently at her scarf as she pushed the bike the rest of the way up. When she reached the top, she froze. Below her lay the sea. Not the dark, crowded harbors she was used to, but a vast, gleaming expanse that shimmered in hues of sapphire and emerald. Waves rolled onto a crescent beach where the only footprints belonged to birds and deer. In the distance, she spotted dark-shaped seals, perhaps sunbathing on rocks like sleepy royalty. She descended carefully, parking the bike beneath a bent pine and walking barefoot across the sand. The beach was utterly silent, save for the crashing of the waves and the rustle of seagrass. It was the kind of place that didn't just feel private, it felt sacred. Lyra wandered along the shoreline, her shoes in one hand, the cold foam kissing her ankles. She picked up shells, driftwood, and the occasional piece of sea glass, slipping them into the woven satchel at her side. At one point, she found a cluster of tide pools nestled between jagged black rocks, each one a miniature world, tiny fish darting beneath rippling water, starfish clinging to stone, sea anemones swaying like underwater dancers. She sat for a while, watching a crab scuttle across a sunlit patch of wet stone. The breeze pulled strands of hair across her face, and she closed her eyes, surrendering. Then she heard it. A whisper. Faint. Almost imagined. Not from behind her, not from the trees or dunes, but from the sea itself. It came between the rhythm of waves, as if the water was speaking a language her heart somehow remembered. She opened her eyes, scanning the horizon. Nothing but endless water and sky. But the feeling remained. Lyra stayed until the sun began to tilt westward, casting long shadows and washing the sand in amber light. Then she made her way back to the bike, slipping her shoes back on and brushing the sand from her legs. Instead of taking the same trail home, she chose a longer path that curved through a region called the Hollow Pines, a forested corridor where the trees grew tall and closely knit, their branches arching overhead like cathedral ceilings. The temperature dropped slightly in the shade, and the air smelled richer here of damp moss, old bark, and something older still. The path narrowed into a single lane, lined with wild mushrooms and white-blossomed shrubs. At one point, she passed a moss-covered stone with carvings so worn they were barely visible spirals, perhaps, or waves. She paused beside the stone and reached out, brushing her fingers across its surface. It felt warm. Strange. By the time she arrived back at the cottage, the sun was low, painting the glade in orange fire. The shadows were long, the birds quieter now, and the air held the coolness of oncoming night. Inside, the cottage glowed with reflected sunlight. Lyra lit a few candles, started a small fire in the hearth, and cooked a simple dinner of eggs, bread, and sliced fruit. As she ate, she listened not to music or podcasts, but to the creak of wood, the sigh of trees, and the crackling flames. When the stars began to bloom across the sky, she stepped outside once more, wrapping herself in a thick blanket. The night was breathtaking. Without city lights, the stars were radiant, millions of them scattered across the sky like spilled silver. She lay on the wooden porch, hands behind her head, eyes wide. The constellations shifted slowly. A meteor streaked across the heavens like a divine spark. In that moment, she realized something. She wasn't just escaping. She was remembering. Remembering what it felt like to be alive, not busy, not productive, not useful, but simply here. She had come to Solmere to rest. But maybe, just maybe, she had also come to awaken. And somewhere in the quiet wind and starlight sky, the island whispered back, "Welcome home, Lyra." The next morning broke with a hush that made Lyra question whether she'd truly woken at all, or simply crossed into a softer kind of dream. Light filtered gently through the lace curtains of the cottage windows, casting patterns like waves across the wooden floor. There was no city roar, no honking traffic or alarm clocks. Only the soft rustle of leaves, the creak of old wood as the cottage stretched into the day, and the gentle call of a distant seabird echoing between the trees. Lyra rolled out of bed with that same quiet wonder pulsing in her chest, the kind of inner stillness she hadn't known she was missing. She made tea in the copper kettle and took her cup outside, barefoot on the dew-soaked porch, to breathe in the morning air. The pine-scented mist hung low over the grass, curling lazily in the rising sun. The memory of the previous day danced through her mind, finding the hidden beach, the whispering tide, and the ancient stone in the forest that had pulsed oddly beneath her touch. The air had felt different there. Thicker. Like the forest itself had been watching. After a simple breakfast, Lyra studied the map again. Maeve had marked a place near the northern cliffs, a lighthouse, red-roofed and weather-beaten, standing like a sentinel at the edge of the world. Her friend had circled it with bold ink and scrawled in the margin, "Go here on your second day. I swear the view will change you." Challenge accepted. She packed a few essentials, a water flask, a small sketchbook, her camera, and climbed onto the red bicycle again. The tires crackled on gravel as she set off along the coastal path. As she rode, the landscape shifted from dense pine forest to wildflower meadows, then to open fields flanked by rows of low stone walls covered in moss and lichens. Cows grazed in the distance, their tails flicking lazily. A fox darted across the road ahead, and for a brief moment, their eyes met hers, human, his feral, and something ancient in the stare. By late morning, she reached the base of a long, winding hill. The lighthouse stood at the top. It rose from the earth like something out of a folk tale, tall and narrow, painted a deep cherry red with white accents, weather-streaked and stoic against the bright blue sky. Its glass lantern gleamed faintly in the sun, even though no beam lit its lens by day. Lyra parked her bicycle at the base and looked up the winding wooden staircase carved into the side of the hill. She grinned and started the climb, step by step, her breath growing shallower, her legs burning with the effort, but her heart beating wildly in anticipation. Halfway up, she paused to catch her breath. Below her, the island stretched in every direction, forests and beaches, winding roads, and hidden glades, all cradled by the soft embrace of the sea. At the top, the world opened. The wind hit her first, sharp, salty, electric. It tugged at her hair and scarf, playful and wild. She turned in a slow circle, drinking in the panorama. To the east, the sun shimmered on endless waves. To the west, the forest canopy rolled like a living tide. To the north, far beyond the cliffs, she spotted dark birds circling above a distant rock shelf. And to the south, the little village from which she'd begun this journey nestled like a forgotten postcard scene. And then she saw something that stopped her entirely. A figure. Standing near the base of the lighthouse. Not far from her bike. She hadn't seen anyone else on the trail. No sounds of footsteps. No conversation. But there the figure stood, facing the sea, long coat, white hat, hands clasped behind their back. A lighthouse keeper. She watched for a moment, heart flickering with curiosity. The figure turned slightly, as if sensing her attention, and raised one hand in a lazy, slow wave before turning back toward the cliffs. Something in that gesture felt oddly familiar. Lyra descended the steps cautiously. But by the time she reached the bottom, the figure was gone. No footprints in the soft grass. No sign of a trail disturbed. Her bicycle stood exactly where she had left it, undisturbed. Just beside it, though, sat something that hadn't been there before, a small stone, smooth and flat, marked with the same spiral carving she'd seen on the moss-covered boulder in the hollow pines. She picked it up slowly. It was warm to the touch. And the spiral, though weathered, felt deliberate. Not a natural formation. A symbol. A sign. She tucked it into her satchel without fully knowing why. On her ride back, the island seemed to shift. Or maybe her senses had. The trees leaned closer, whispering in the wind. Birds flew alongside her for longer than usual. She passed a small cottage with a thatched roof where an old woman sat knitting on the porch. The woman lifted her head as Lyra passed, and for the briefest instant, their eyes locked and the woman smiled as if she knew her. By the time she reached Pine Tree Cottage again, the sun was just beginning to dip toward the horizon, painting the world in warm, coppery hues. Inside, The cottage welcomed her like an old friend. The fireplace still held a bit of warmth from the morning fire. A fresh bouquet of wildflowers sat on the table. She was certain she hadn't placed it there. No note. No explanation. Just color and fragrance. She didn't question it. Instead, she boiled water, added herbs from the cottage's tiny spice rack, and brewed a cup of floral tea. She curled up in the nook by the window, wrapped in a knitted throw blanket, and finally opened her sketchbook. Her fingers moved without thought. She drew the spiral. Again and again. In the margins, she added waves. Trees. The red lighthouse. A figure in a wide-brimmed hat, always with their back turned. When the sky finally darkened and the stars blinked into view, she stood outside once more, stone in hand. The wind kissed her cheeks, colder now, full of night's promises. She whispered into the breeze. I don't know what you are yet, but I'm listening. And far in the distance, just beyond hearing, the island whispered back. The morning sun had barely crested over the treetops when Lyra woke to a low, melodic humming drifting through her open window. It was faint at first, soft as wind chimes caught in a breeze, but the melody was unlike anything she'd heard before. It wasn't music, not in the traditional sense. It was layered and old, almost like it belonged to the stones beneath the earth or the trees that had stood for centuries. She lay still, wrapped in warmth, letting the sound wash over her like a memory. And then, it stopped. The silence that followed was even deeper than before. She sat up slowly, glancing around the quiet cottage. Everything was just as she'd left it the night before: mugs on the counter, her coat by the door, the smooth spiral stone now resting on the nightstand like a talisman. But something in the air had shifted. She felt it on her skin, in her breath. The kind of shift that preceded revelation. Lyra dressed quickly and tucked the spiral stone into her pocket, letting her fingers rest against its familiar surface. She grabbed her satchel and stepped outside into the dewy morning light. The forest shimmered with golden mist, and a faint trail of footprints, too faint to say if they were hers, seemed to wind through the grass, heading toward a path she hadn't noticed before. A new route. Narrow and mossy, half hidden by fern and clover. She followed it. The trail twisted deeper into the woods, curving past old stone ruins now nearly swallowed by vines. The air grew cooler here, heavier. A raven watched her from a gnarled branch, its head tilted, as if curious. It let out a single low crow and then flew deeper into the trees, tracing the path ahead. Lyra followed. After what felt like an hour of weaving through roots and undergrowth, she stumbled upon a clearing. At its center stood a stone cottage unlike her own. This one was older, ancient, even its roof sagging under layers of moss, its windows streaked with time. A wooden sign above the door had faded nearly to illegibility, but one word was still visible beneath the wear. Cartographos. She blinked. The map maker. Drawn by curiosity and the strange pull that had brought her here, she knocked once, hesitated, then gently pushed the door open. The scent of old parchment and cedar greeted her instantly. Inside, the room was filled with scrolls and maps, piled in corners and hanging from strings like drying clothes. Intricate star charts, island topographies, forest floor patterns rendered with impossible detail. A massive map of the island itself hung on the far wall, hand-drawn, with tiny moving parts. Little boats rocked in the painted sea. Wind symbols shifted. And next to the red lighthouse, a new symbol flickered softly, a spiral. And beside that, a mark she hadn't seen before, a symbol that looked like an open eye. Before she could study it further, a voice spoke from behind her. "You're early." She spun around. An old man stood in the doorway, dressed in a layered coat the color of dusted bark. His eyes were the color of lichen, pale green and alive with something ancient. His face was worn, creased from wind and time, but his smile was gentle. I'm sorry," Lyra stammered. "I didn't mean to intrude. I was just drawn here," he finished for her, nodding. "They all are." He stepped around her, moving toward the map with the ease of someone who had walked these floorboards longer than the forest had drawn breath. "Most visitors don't find this place," he said. "Not unless they've begun listening." Listening. He turned and tapped the spiral symbol carved into the map. "To the island." Lyra swallowed. "What is this place?" "A library of forgotten paths," he said with a faint smile. "Maps of the seen and unseen. I chart the shifting bones of Solmere. She moves, you know. The island, I mean. Not just the tides and trees. The land itself shifts when the right soul arrives." "Why me?" she asked quietly. "You were called." He gestured toward a side table where an unfinished map sat beneath a glowing stone. Its outline was unmistakable: Pine Tree Cottage, the red lighthouse, the secret cove. But one part of the map just beyond the hollow pines was completely blank, save for a caption written in neat, faded script. "The veiled path reveals itself only once." Lyra felt her heartbeat in her fingertips. "Can I go there?" "You can try," the mapmaker said, placing a hand over the spiral stone in her pocket. "But you must leave behind something to gain entry." "Leave behind, what?" He didn't answer. Instead, he pulled a rolled parchment from a shelf and handed it to her. "This will get you to the threshold. After that, you're on your own." She took it gently. The scroll was tied with twine and sealed with wax again, the spiral emblem. As she turned to leave, the mapmaker added, almost absently, "Not all paths are meant to be walked. Some are meant to be remembered. Others rewritten." She stepped back into the light, head swimming. The veiled path. She mounted her bike and rode in silence for a long while, the scroll in her satchel pulsing with presence. As she passed the hollow pines again, the shadows between the trees seemed deeper. Whisper-like wind threaded between the trunks, and that humming sound returned clearer this time, a tune she almost recognized from her dreams. When she reached the edge of the marked trail, she paused. The forest ahead was dense, wild, untamed. But somewhere beyond it, something waited. Something that remembered her. She stepped off the bike, left it leaning against an old pine, and took her first step into the unknown. Behind her, the spiral stone in her pocket warmed once again. And above, through a gap in the trees, the red light of the lighthouse blinked once. Twice. A heartbeat. Then vanished. The air had thickened by the time Lyra stepped beyond the last of the hollow pines, the trees behind her now lost in the fading light of the day. The path ahead felt unfamiliar, as though it had been waiting for her, though she'd never noticed it before. The ground underfoot shifted from soft dirt to something drier, harder, like an ancient surface that had been left undisturbed for centuries. Every instinct screamed at her to turn back. The mapmaker's cryptic words echoed in her mind, "Not all paths are meant to be walked. Some are meant to be remembered. Others rewritten." She shook her head, trying to clear the doubts that clung to her thoughts. The pull toward the unknown was stronger than any fear she might feel. With a deep breath, Lyra took another step forward. As she did, the trees seemed to lean closer, their branches twisting into unnatural shapes, as if trying to reach out to her. The air was still, save for the occasional rustle of dry leaves tumbling through the underbrush. Everything was quiet, too quiet. It was as though the island itself was holding its breath. Her eyes kept darting between the shadows, expecting to see movement. She had no idea what she was walking toward, only that she felt this presence that was at once welcoming and ominous. Her hand brushed the scroll in her satchel, the wax seal still intact, reminding her of the journey that lay ahead. The mapmaker had warned her about the dangers, but she hadn't come this far only to turn back now. Besides, the island had chosen her. It had been calling to her, pulling her here, and there was no escaping it. The trail narrowed as it led deeper into the thicket, and after a while, Lyra noticed something odd. The trees were beginning to thin. The forest was parting, opening up into a wide, circular clearing. At the center of the clearing stood a massive stone archway, worn and ancient, its surface cracked with age. The stone was laced with vines and moss, as though it had grown out of the earth itself. There was no door, no visible entrance, just the arch, looming like a silent sentinel. Lyra approached slowly, her pulse quickening as she reached out to touch the cold stone. As her fingers made contact, a pulse of warmth shot through her, and the air around her seemed to shift. The archway shimmered for a moment, as though the fabric of reality itself had bent around her touch. Lyra pulled her hand back, but it was too late. A soft humming began to fill the air, like the sound of a distant bell tolling across the ocean. The ground beneath her feet rumbled, and a thick mist began to rise from the base of the arch. It swirled like a living thing, winding its way up the stone, and then, in a blink, the mist parted, revealing what lay beyond. Lyra took a cautious step forward. It wasn't what she expected. Beyond the archway was not more forest, not more of the island. No, it was a city. Or rather, a memory of a city. Ancient stone structures lined a cobblestone street, their walls worn smooth with age. The buildings seemed to sway as if they were both real and not real, caught between two worlds. Light filtered through the gaps in the mist, casting long shadows across the deserted streets. There was no movement, no sign of life. But the city felt alive in some strange, intangible way, as though it existed in the very space between dreams and reality. Lyra's heart pounded in her chest as she stepped forward, crossing the threshold of the archway. The mist wrapped around her like a cloak, and she felt a strange pressure in her ears, like being submerged underwater. The sound of her footsteps was muffled, swallowed by the thick atmosphere. Every step she took felt heavier, as though the air itself was thickening with every breath she drew. She glanced around, taking in the sight of the empty streets, the crumbling stone, and the faint hum that seemed to vibrate from the very ground. It was both beautiful and haunting, a place frozen in time. Her fingers tightened around the scroll in her bag. Suddenly, a voice broke the silence. Not many find their way here. Lyra froze, her heart skipping a beat. She turned quickly, but there was no one in sight. The voice came again, this time from a nearby alleyway. Not many choose to walk the veiled path, but then, not everyone hears the call. Lyra's pulse quickened as a figure stepped into view from the shadowed street. It was a woman, tall and cloaked in flowing robes that seemed to shimmer with the same ethereal glow as the mist. Her face was hidden beneath the hood, but her presence was unmistakable. She radiated the same energy Lyra had felt since she first set foot on the island. Something old, something forgotten. "Who are you?" Lyra asked, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to stay calm. The woman smiled, though Lyra couldn't see her mouth. The smile was warm, almost knowing. "I am the keeper of the path. And you, my dear, are the one who has come seeking." "Seeking what?" Lyra whispered, her gaze fixed on the woman's hidden face. The keeper tilted her head slightly, as if considering the question. "The veiled path is not a journey for the faint-hearted. You seek answers, yes, but what you find may not be what you expect." Lyra stepped closer, unable to shake the feeling that the city around her was watching, listening. "What is this place? And why is it here?" The keeper chuckled softly, a sound like leaves brushing against stone. "This place is the island's memory. It is where all that was once lost, forgotten, or hidden lies dormant. It exists outside of time, beyond the island's natural order. You've crossed into a world that is both real and not, a place of reflection." Lyra's mind reeled. A place of reflection. But it felt real, too real to be just a dream or illusion. She glanced around again, at the decaying streets, the silent city, and the endless mist that seemed to hold everything in its grasp. What happens now? Lyra asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. The keeper's smile faded slightly, replaced by a solemn expression. Now, you must decide. The path ahead is yours to walk, but it comes with a price. You will uncover truths about the island, about yourself, and about the memories that bind this place together. But not all truths are meant to be known. Lyra swallowed, a chill creeping up her spine. What do you mean? What's the price? The keeper's voice grew softer, almost tender. The price is your perception. When you walk through the veiled path, you will change. You will not return the same person who entered. And once the memory is unlocked, there is no turning back. Lyra stood still, the weight of her decision pressing down on her. She wanted to turn back, to walk away and never look back. But she knew she couldn't. Not now. I'm ready, she said, her voice steady despite the storm brewing in her chest. The keeper's eyes gleamed beneath the hood, and she nodded. Then go. And may the island remember you. With that, the keeper vanished into the mist, leaving Lyra alone in the quiet, forgotten city. Lyra took a deep breath, the weight of the decision settling within her. She walked forward, stepping into the streets of the city, the mist curling around her like a second skin. She didn't know what lay ahead, but she knew this was the beginning of something that would change everything. And as the mist closed in, the city seemed to come alive around her. The journey had begun. Lyra's footsteps echoed softly in the mist-soaked streets, each step heavier than the last, as if the city itself was pulling at her with invisible threads. The buildings, crumbling and worn, stood like silent witnesses to some long-forgotten time. Their windows were hollowed eyes, empty and watching. The air was thick with the scent of old stone, damp earth, and something else, a faint, almost sweet fragrance that seemed to cling to the very walls. The city wasn't just abandoned. It was preserved, locked in an eternal stasis, as though it had been waiting for someone to come and unlock its secrets. Lyra felt it in her bones, the weight of all that had been hidden. The stories the stone walls wanted to tell. She walked down the narrow street, past arches covered in creeping ivy, feeling her pulse quicken with each step. It was as though the island itself was holding its breath, waiting for her to do something. The veil of mist clung to her skin, and the deeper she ventured, the more she felt the presence of this forgotten city seeping into her very soul. The cobblestones beneath her feet were uneven, weathered by time, but there was something about the pattern in the stones, something deliberate in the way they were arranged. She knelt down, brushing her fingers over the rough surface. The stone felt warm, though she couldn't explain why. And then she saw it. A symbol, etched into the stone, a spiral, just like the one on the map, the one she'd found on the beach, the one in her pocket. But this one was different. It was larger, more intricate, with lines that radiated outward like the waves in a pond. The spiral was not just a shape, it was an invitation. An invitation to something more. Lyra traced the lines carefully with her finger. As she did, a soft tremor ran through the ground. The stone beneath her hand shifted slightly, and for a moment, the air grew thick, almost electric. She stood up quickly, heart racing. It was as if the city was responding to her touch, reacting to her presence. The stone shimmered slightly under the misty light, and then without warning the ground beneath her feet rumbled. A low, resonant sound, like the shifting of ancient gears, filled the air. The mist swirled violently, and before Lyra could move, the cobblestones in front of her began to crack and shift. A door, no, a passageway emerged from the stone. It was narrow, almost hidden, and the walls on either side were lined with symbols, spirals, waves, and other markings she couldn't immediately recognize. But one thing was clear, the path before her was not just physical, it was a doorway to something far deeper. Her breath caught in her throat. The city was waking. Lyra hesitated, the pull of curiosity and fear tangled in her chest. She glanced behind her, but there was no sign of the keeper, no one to tell her whether she was making the right choice. It was only her now, in this forgotten place, where time had no meaning and the rules of the world seemed to bend with each passing moment. The passageway beckoned. With a deep breath, Lyra stepped forward, her hand brushing the cold stone walls as she passed. The air inside the passage was damp, and the light from the mist outside barely reached the shadows ahead. She walked carefully, every step echoing in the stillness, until she reached a large stone archway. The archway was adorned with intricate carvings of waves, stars, and moon, symbols of the sea, of the night, of something ancient. But at the center of the arch, there was another spiral, this one glowing faintly, pulsing with a soft, otherworldly light. As she approached the spiral, the ground beneath her feet rumbled again. A hum filled the air, and the light of the spiral grew brighter. Lyra stepped closer, drawn in by the warmth of the glow, her heart pounding in her chest. She reached out a hand, her fingers trembling as they brushed the surface of the stone. The moment her fingers made contact, the ground trembled violently. The air shifted, the light flaring, and the spiral seemed to draw her in, pulling her deeper into its grip. Lyra gasped as she felt herself being sucked into the stone, as though the very fabric of reality had bent around her. She tried to pull back, but the force was too strong. The world around her twisted and blurred, and then everything went dark. When Lyra opened her eyes again, the world around her had changed. The city, the mist, the passage, everything was gone. She was standing in the middle of a vast, open space, the ground beneath her feet soft and warm. The sky above was deep, swirling purple, filled with stars that shone like diamonds. There was no horizon, no walls, only an endless expanse that stretched far beyond her sight. The air was thick with the scent of salt and earth, and the sound of waves crashing against an unseen shore filled the silence. Lyra turned around, her heart racing in her chest. The spiral symbol was still glowing faintly on her palm, the same one that had appeared in the city. But now, it felt different. It felt alive. And then, from the distance, she saw it. A figure standing at the edge of the space, looking out toward the endless horizon. The figure was tall, cloaked in robes that shimmered like the night sky itself. The figure's head was bowed, and the air around them seemed to vibrate with a low hum, like the deep resonance of a song that had been sung for centuries. Lyra took a tentative step forward, but the figure didn't move. She felt drawn to them, as if they held the answers she had been seeking. The path she had walked, the symbols she had followed, all of it had led her here. To this moment. To this figure. Who are you? She whispered into the stillness, her voice barely more than a breath. The figure turned slowly, their face hidden beneath a hood of darkness. But even without seeing their eyes, Lyra knew that this was the keeper, the one who had guided her all this time. The one who had brought her here. You have found the veiled path, the keeper said, their voice a low, melodic hum that echoed through the expanse. And now you must decide. Will you walk it to its end, or will you turn back, leaving the mysteries of this place behind? Lyra's heart pounded in her chest, the weight of the decision pressing down on her. She had come so far. She couldn't turn back now. I will walk it, she said, her voice steady. I'm ready. The keeper nodded slowly, and the expanse around them seemed to shift, as if the very air was shifting with the gravity of her decision. Then come, the keeper said, their voice ringing with the resonance of ancient things, and let the path reveal what it has hidden. With that, the keeper turned and began to walk toward the horizon, their robes trailing behind them like the folds of night. Lyra followed, stepping into the unknown, knowing that this path would change her forever. Lyra's feet sank slightly into the soft, almost silken ground as she walked behind the keeper, the endless horizon stretching before her. The landscape was shifting, warping with every step. It was as though the very fabric of the world around her was alive, responding to her thoughts, her intentions. The keeper walked ahead, silent, their presence like a shadow guiding, but not leading. The stars above flickered in strange constellations, their patterns changing like a living puzzle. The swirling sky seemed to pulse with the same rhythm as her heart, each beat syncing with the hum of the land beneath her. For the first time, Lyra realized that she had crossed into something far beyond a simple island or a forgotten city. She had crossed into the core of Solmere itself, its heart, its soul. This was no longer a place of maps or familiar landmarks. This was something ancient, something primal, a realm where time and space bent to the will of the island. How far are we going? Lyra asked, her voice barely breaking the silence. The question felt insignificant, a mere whisper against the overwhelming presence of the place. The keeper's head turned slowly, but their face remained hidden beneath the hood. Their voice was soft, but it vibrated with the force of deep currents, old and unknowable. Not far, they said. You have already traveled farther than you know. Now, you must reach the island's heart. Only there will you find what you seek. Lyra nodded, unsure of what to expect. The path ahead was still invisible, hidden beneath layers of mist, yet it was clear that they were being guided to something far greater than a mere physical location. There was a pull in the air, like a magnetic force drawing her closer to something that had been waiting for millennia. The ground beneath them began to shift again, and the faint glow from the keeper's robes illuminated something ahead, an ancient, towering structure. At first, Lyra thought it was just a trick of the light, but as they moved closer, the shape became clearer. A temple, its stone columns wrapped in thick vines, its archways wide and open to the sky. It was both magnificent and decayed, partially swallowed by the land, but still standing proud against the weight of time. "This is the heart of Solmere," the keeper said, their voice steady and deep. "It has been here since the beginning, a place of balance, of power. The island's heart beats within these walls, and only those who understand its pulse may uncover its secrets." Lyra stopped in her tracks. The air around her grew thick with anticipation, as though the world was holding its breath. The structure before her seemed to resonate with a deep, primal energy, calling her forward. "Do I need to go inside?" she asked, her throat dry. It was as though every step toward the temple felt like a step toward something inevitable, something she couldn't undo. The keeper nodded. "The door is always open to those who truly seek. But the truth that lies within will reveal not only what the island holds, but also what you have come to find within yourself." Lyra hesitated for a moment. The weight of their words settled over her, and she realized just how little she knew of the true nature of this place. It wasn't just about discovering the island's secrets. It was about discovering herself. With a deep breath, she walked toward the temple, each step feeling heavier, like a stepping stone in a river that would carry her farther from where she had once been. She reached the large stone doors, their surfaces etched with ancient symbols, and placed her hand against the cool stone. A soft hum vibrated beneath her fingertips, and the doors slowly creaked open, as if welcoming her inside. The moment she stepped over the threshold, the air changed. It was cooler inside, but not uncomfortable. The light seemed to shimmer from within the stone itself, casting long shadows along the walls. Inside the temple, the space opened into a massive chamber, a circular room with no windows, only a skylight above, where the stars seemed to shimmer more brightly than they had anywhere else on the island. At the center of the room stood an altar, made of stone and covered in vines. And on that altar was a heart. A real, beating heart. Lyra stopped, her breath catching in her throat. The heart glowed with an ethereal light, pulsing with the rhythm of the island itself. It was enormous, larger than anything she had ever seen, and yet it seemed to fit perfectly in the center of the chamber, as if it had always belonged there. "Is this the island's heart?" Lyra asked, her voice trembling. The keeper, now standing at the entrance of the temple, nodded silently. "It is. But it is not just the island's heart. It is the heart of everything. All that has been, all that will be, and all that is forgotten. The island's pulse runs through the land, through the sea, and through you." Lyra stepped closer, her eyes fixed on the glowing heart. As she approached, she felt an overwhelming sense of connection, like her heartbeat was syncing with the rhythm of the island itself. She could feel the pulse in her chest, deep and steady, like the land was alive beneath her feet. The closer she got, the more she understood. This heart wasn't just a symbol of the island, it was a part of her. A part of all who had walked this path before her. And it wasn't merely a physical object, it was a gateway. A connection to everything the island had been and everything it would become. As Lyra stood before the altar, she realized that the heart was not just a place to find answers, it was the key to unlocking something deeper within herself. Something that had been waiting to be discovered. The keeper stepped forward, their eyes glowing faintly beneath the hood. "You are ready," they said softly. Lyra reached out, her hand trembling as she touched the heart. The moment her fingers made contact, a surge of energy shot through her, overwhelming her senses. Her vision blurred, her heartbeat quickened, and the air around her seemed to crackle with ancient power. The island's pulse roared in her ears, and for a moment, Lyra could see everything past, present, and future flowing together in a single, endless stream. She saw the island in its prime, covered in lush forests and sprawling shores. She saw the ruins of ancient cities, the bones of forgotten civilizations. She saw herself, her life, her journey, and she understood, truly understood, that she had always been a part of this island's story. The truth hit her like a wave. This was not just a place she had come to escape. It was a place she had always belonged. A place that had been waiting for her to remember who she truly was. With a final, shuddering breath, Lyra pulled her hand away, the vision fading as quickly as it had come. The heart before her pulsed one last time, its glow fading to a soft, steady rhythm. She felt the island's power settle within her, and with it, a new understanding of her purpose. She had come to find answers. But she had also come to awaken. The keeper stood in silence, watching her. "The island has shown you what you needed to see. Now, it is time to choose." Lyra nodded slowly, the weight of the decision heavy in her chest. She understood now. She wasn't just walking the island's path. She was the path. And she had just begun to write her story. The chamber around Lyra felt like a dream, as though the space itself had shifted to accommodate her presence. The glow of the island's heart slowly faded, leaving behind the faintest trace of light. The temple, too, felt different now, darker, quieter, as though it had been waiting for something to happen. And something had indeed changed. Something deep inside her. The keeper stood silently at the entrance, their eyes never leaving Lyra, as if waiting for her to process the flood of knowledge and power that had just surged through her. "You've seen it," the keeper said softly, their voice like the wind in the trees. "The island's pulse. Its truth. And now you must decide." Lyra swallowed, her mind spinning. The vision of the island, the lush forests, the forgotten cities, the endless shores flashed before her eyes. And alongside it, the realization, she was part of it all. She always had been. This place, this island, was her home in a way that she couldn't explain. But the keeper's words still lingered in her mind. Now you must decide. Decide? Lyra asked, her voice unsteady. What do you mean? The keeper's gaze softened, and they stepped forward, coming closer to the altar where the heart had once pulsed. This island, Lyra, it's not just a place. It is a memory. A heartbeat of everything that was, everything that is, and everything that will be. You have felt its pulse. Now you must decide if you will carry that pulse with you. If you will become one with it. Lyra's heart raced as she took a tentative step toward the keeper. But I don't understand. If I take this power, what will happen? What am I choosing? The keeper's expression remained unreadable, their eyes distant as if they could see something Lyra couldn't. What you are choosing is not just the island's secrets, but your own. The truth you will awaken is not just about Solmere. It is about you, your past, your future, and your connection to this place. Lyra stood still, the weight of the decision pressing down on her. The power she had felt coursing through her moments ago, the knowledge of the island's heart, could she really accept all that it entailed? Was she willing to embrace the unknown, to become more than who she was? I've always felt out of place, Lyra confessed softly, looking down at her hands. Like there was something I was meant to do, something I was meant to find. But I never knew what it was. And now that I've seen this, I don't know if I'm ready. The keeper's voice softened, their words carrying the weight of the ages. You have always been ready. It is the island that has been waiting for you, not the other way around. The heart has chosen you. And now you must choose, will you return to your old life, or will you step into the currents of the island's flow, taking its pulse with you, carrying its heartbeat into the world? Lyra closed her eyes, feeling the echoes of the island's pulse in her chest. It was like the island was calling her home, pulling her back into its rhythm, back to a place she had never known but somehow always belonged. She thought of the city she had left behind, the noise, the rush, the emptiness. It felt like a lifetime ago. The city, her job, her routine, they all seemed so distant now. What she had felt there, the sense of being lost, was nothing compared to the clarity she felt here. She took a deep breath, the air thick with the scent of salt and pine, and stepped forward, closer to the altar where the island's heart once pulsed. I choose, she whispered, her voice steady but filled with a new resolve. I choose to stay. To learn. To awaken. The keeper nodded slowly, a faint smile appearing beneath the hood. Then your journey begins. The ground beneath Lyra's feet shifted once more, and the temple around her began to hum with energy. The walls vibrated, the symbols etched into the stone glowing faintly, and the air grew thick with the presence of something ancient and powerful. Lyra stepped back, but the keeper raised a hand, signaling for her to stay. The island's heart beats within you now. But you will not walk this path alone. there are others like you, and you will find them. They, too, are drawn to Solmere. Together, you will unlock the island's true secrets. Lyra frowned, her mind racing. Others. Who are they? The ones who listen to the pulse, the keeper said softly, stepping aside to reveal a hidden doorway behind the altar. They are the island's guardians. They will come to you when the time is right. But for now, you must walk the path alone. Seek the places that are forgotten. Find the memories that remain hidden. Lyra stepped toward the doorway, the air growing colder as she passed through it. The walls inside were covered in intricate carvings, maps of the island and its hidden places. It felt like she was entering the very heart of Solmere, the beating core of the island's existence. You will be tested, the keeper's voice echoed behind her. But remember, the island will guide you. And you will find what you seek, in time. Lyra nodded, her pulse quickening as the doorway closed behind her. The passage was narrow, lined with strange symbols that seemed to move as she passed. She didn't know what lay ahead, but she could feel the island's energy, pulsing beneath her skin. The world outside had faded. This was a place where time was no longer her own. This was the island's truth untouched, eternal, waiting for her to uncover its secrets. As she walked deeper into the stone passage, the sound of the island's pulse grew louder in her ears, a steady rhythm that beat like the heart of the world itself. She felt it in her chest, in her bones, as though the island had become a part of her, and she was a part of it. And when she stepped into the next chamber, her heart skipped a beat. The walls were covered in ancient murals, stories of Solmere's past, its rise and fall, its mysteries and its power. At the center of the room was a large pedestal, and on it lay a book, its cover adorned with the same spiral symbol she had seen throughout the island. It was a map. The map. The real map. With trembling hands, Lyra reached for it. As her fingers brushed the cover, a surge of energy coursed through her. The room blurred, the walls seeming to shift and change, and for a moment, she saw flashes of the island's history, of the guardians who had protected it, of the ones who had come before her. The truth was within her reach. And the journey, it seemed, was only just beginning. Lyra's heart raced as she held the ancient book, its cover warm beneath her fingers. The air around her seemed to pulse, vibrating with the same energy that had coursed through her when she first touched the island's heart. She could feel the connection, the deep, undeniable bond between her and the island. This book was more than just a map, it was a key, a guide to unlocking the island's deepest secrets. As she slowly opened the book, the pages were revealed to be made of worn, weathered parchment. The ink was faded in places, but the symbols were clear and precise, etched with care into the fragile pages. The first page contained a map of Solmere, not like the one she had seen before, but a much older version, one that seemed to stretch beyond the island's current boundaries, reaching into areas she had never known existed. The land, the sea, the forests all seemed to shimmer on the page as if alive. But it wasn't just the map that caught her attention. In the corners of the pages, there were symbols, spirals, waves, and strange geometric shapes. Some were familiar, like the spiral she had seen on the stone altar, while others were completely unknown to her. The pages turned slowly, revealing more of the island's history. Stories of ancient civilizations, forgotten places, and the guardians who had once protected the heart of Solmere. But one page stood out more than the rest. It was a page that seemed to glow faintly, the ink brighter than the others. It depicted a large stone door, etched with the same spiral symbol, standing at the edge of a vast, dark forest. Beneath it, there was a single phrase written in a language Lyra couldn't understand at first. But as her eyes scanned the letters, the words began to shift, changing into a language she could read. Only those who seek the truth may enter. The heart of the island lies beyond this door, but the price of knowledge is steep. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. The heart of the island. Beyond this door. Her fingers hovered over the page. She could feel the weight of the words, the warning, the promise. The island had secrets, dark and ancient, buried deep within its core. And it seemed that she was the one chosen to uncover them. But what would it cost her? The keeper's words echoed in her mind, not all paths are meant to be walked. Some are meant to be remembered. Others rewritten. Lyra shook her head, trying to dispel the fear that gnawed at her. She had come this far, and there was no turning back now. The island was calling her, and the truth it held was hers to discover. She continued turning the pages, each one revealing more cryptic symbols and faded illustrations. The book detailed the rise of the guardians, the protectors of the island's heart, and the power they held. But as the pages progressed, the tone shifted. The guardians had not always been protectors. Some had fallen victim to the island's power, corrupted by the very heart they had sworn to protect. Lyra felt a shiver run down her spine as she read about the veil, a hidden force that kept the heart of Solmere sealed from the world. The guardians, once protectors, had become prisoners to the heart's power. And now, it seemed, the path to unlocking the island's deepest secrets lay before her. She had to find the door. The one that would lead her to the heart. Suddenly, the book flickered, and the pages turned on their own, as if guided by some unseen force. They stopped on a final, empty page. Lyra stared at the blankness, puzzled. The book had revealed everything except this last page. Her eyes widened as she realized the truth. The final page was not empty. The symbols were still there, but they weren't etched into the paper. They were appearing slowly, like they were being written by some invisible hand. Lyra felt the hair on the back of her neck stand on end as the symbols shifted and formed words in front of her eyes. The heart is not just a place, but a part of you. To unlock its true power, you must embrace both the light and the darkness within. The message sent a jolt through her, and she stumbled back, the book falling from her hands and landing with a soft thud. The words lingered in the air, glowing faintly, like a warning that she couldn't ignore. The light and the darkness. She had already felt the pull of both the quiet peace of the island, the serenity of the forest, the knowledge she had uncovered, but also the whispers of something darker, something ancient, something that lay hidden beneath the surface. Was she ready to confront that darkness? To truly understand the island's heart, she would have to face whatever it had been keeping hidden all these centuries. Lyra closed her eyes and exhaled slowly, gathering her strength. She had come this far. She could feel the truth pressing against her, like the weight of a storm about to break. When she opened her eyes again, the book was still on the ground, the final message glowing softly. The chamber around her had grown still, and the mist outside the temple had grown thicker, swirling around the edges of the walls. Lyra stood and picked up the book, clutching it tightly. The keeper's words echoed again, "The island will guide you, but it will also test you." The door was waiting. The path was clear. And with each step she took, the island's heart grew louder, its pulse resonating within her, drawing her closer to the truth. But as she stepped toward the door, a voice faint, like the wind through the trees, whispered in her ear. "Remember, the price of knowledge is steep." And for the first time, Lyra truly understood what that meant. The door to the heart was just ahead, and it was time for her to step through. There was no turning back now. She was not just walking the island's path, she was becoming a part of it. Lyra's breath caught in her chest as she stood before the stone door, its surface etched with the ancient symbols that had come to define this journey. The spiral, the waves, the geometric patterns that seemed to shift and change depending on where she stood. She could feel the hum of energy in the air, a pulsing rhythm that matched the beating of her own heart. The keeper's words rang in her ears, "The island will guide you, but it will also test you." She had come this far, through mysteries and revelations, through the heart of Solmere itself. She had felt its pulse. She had touched its memory. And now, standing before this door, she knew that the final truth awaited her on the other side. But what lay beyond the veil? The book had warned her, had shown her the dangers of unlocking the island's deepest secrets. What would it cost her to discover what lay beyond this threshold? Lyra took a deep breath and stepped closer to the door. Her fingers brushed against the cool stone, the symbols glowing faintly beneath her touch. A soft tremor ran through her, and for a moment, the world seemed to blur around her. The mist thickened, swirling in the air, and the pulse of the island grew louder, echoing through her veins. As her hand moved over the stone, the symbols shifted again, rearranging themselves as though the door was alive, responding to her presence. The spirals unfurled, the waves rippled, and the patterns grew more complex, like the threads of fate intertwining before her eyes. She could feel it now, the island's heartbeat, so close, so powerful. It wasn't just the pulse of the land anymore. It was her own heartbeat, syncing with the rhythm of Solmere. She was no longer an outsider, no longer just a visitor. She had become part of this place. And now, the final step would reveal her true purpose. The door creaked open, slowly, as though it had been waiting for her to unlock it. The mist parted around her, and she stepped through, her heart racing in anticipation. The space beyond the door was vast, stretching out into an endless expanse. The walls of the chamber seemed to stretch upward, lost in shadow. The air was thick with the scent of ancient wood and earth, and the faintest sound of rushing water echoed through the silence. At the center of the room stood a pedestal, its surface carved with intricate patterns, spirals, waves, and other symbols that Lyra couldn't quite place. And on that pedestal, bathed in soft, golden light, rested a small object. It was a key. Lyra stepped forward, drawn to it by an invisible force. The key was made of stone, intricately carved, and glowed with the same faint pulse she had felt in the heart of Solmere. She reached out cautiously, her fingers brushing the surface of the stone. The moment her hand made contact, a surge of energy rushed through her, and the world around her seemed to dissolve. The ground beneath her feet shifted, the walls faded into darkness, and for a moment, she was suspended in nothingness. She felt herself falling, tumbling through a vortex of light and shadow, unable to control her descent. The world blurred around her, and her senses spun out of control. She tried to scream, but no sound came. And then, everything stopped. Lyra opened her eyes. She was no longer in the chamber. Instead, she found herself standing at the edge of a vast, dark ocean. The sky above was thick with swirling clouds, and the water stretched out as far as the eye could see, dark and tumultuous, like a storm was brewing just beneath the surface. The air was heavy with the scent of salt, and the wind howled, carrying with it a distant, mournful cry. The waves crashed against the shore, rising higher with each passing moment, as though the ocean itself was alive, furious, and waiting. She stepped forward, her feet sinking into the wet sand as she moved toward the water. The key was still in her hand, warm to the touch, its pulse steady against her palm. "What is this place?" Lyra whispered, her voice barely audible against the roar of the ocean. "The heart of the island," a voice replied, soft and distant. Lyra spun around, searching for the source of the voice, but there was no one in sight. Only the dark water, the swirling sky, and the endless horizon. "The heart?" she asked, her voice trembling. "But I've already been to the heart. I've seen its pulse." The voice came again, this time closer, as if it were speaking from inside her mind. "The heart is not a place. It is a force. It is the pulse of all things: life, death, memory, and time. It flows through you now, as it flows through the island." Lyra's fingers tightened around the key, and she turned to face the ocean once more. "What am I supposed to do here? What do I need to find?" The voice was silent for a moment, and when it spoke again, its tone was filled with a deep, knowing sadness. "You must decide. Decide." Lyra repeated, confusion clouding her thoughts. "Decide what?" "You are at the threshold," the voice said softly. "You have unlocked the island's secrets, but there is still a choice you must make. You can embrace the heart, become one with it, and carry its power with you into the world. Or you can leave it behind, and return to your old life. The choice is yours. Lyra stood at the edge of the ocean, the weight of the decision pressing down on her. She could feel the island's pulse in her chest, its energy thrumming beneath her skin, and the thought of leaving it behind seemed impossible. But she had to ask herself, was she ready to carry this power with her into the world? Was she ready to change everything? The waves crashed louder, the wind howled, and the voice spoke once more, its tone filled with both regret and understanding. You will never return the same. Lyra closed her eyes, the weight of the choice heavier than any burden she had ever known. The island had become a part of her, but what would it mean to take that power with her? Would she be able to live with the consequences? And as she stood there, on the edge of the world, the ocean before her, the key in her hand, she realized the truth. The choice wasn't just about the island. It was about her. And so, with one final breath, she made her decision. The mist swirled around her as the world around her began to shift. The ocean faded, the wind died down, and the sky cleared. She opened her eyes once more, and found herself back in the stone chamber, standing before the pedestal once again. The key was no longer in her hand. It had been replaced with something else. A new path. And she was ready to walk it. Lyra's hands trembled as she stood in the chamber, the key now replaced with something far more significant. It wasn't just an object, it was an understanding. The force she had felt within the island's heart, pulsing through her veins, was now fully realized. This was her moment. The path ahead was no longer uncertain. It was hers to walk. The chamber around her had returned to stillness, the echoes of the ocean and the storm now silent in her mind. She stood alone in the stone-walled room, the book still resting on the pedestal, open to the final pages that had revealed the truth. There was no going back. The knowledge had already seeped into her, and the island had given her what she needed. But now, the question loomed larger than ever before: what was she supposed to do with this power? Her fingers brushed over the smooth surface of the stone altar, and a low hum vibrated through the air. The symbols carved into the walls, the spirals, the waves, the geometric patterns seemed to shift and flow, as though they were reacting to her presence. She stepped forward, following the faint glow that seemed to pulse from the center of the chamber, guiding her toward the next stage of her journey. The symbols, the island's pulse, the very essence of everything she had uncovered, everything was drawing her forward. The door to the next room opened with a soft creak, revealing a narrow hallway lined with ancient murals. Each image depicted the island's history, its rise, its fall, and the guardians who had once protected it. The murals were beautiful, but there was a darkness to them, an unspoken tension. These guardians had not always been noble protectors. Some had succumbed to the power of the island's heart, twisted by its pull. Lyra's heart raced as she walked down the hallway, the weight of the decision that lay ahead pressing on her. The path was no longer just about discovering the island's secrets. It was about understanding her place in the world, her role in this larger story? At the end of the hallway, another door stood open. This one was different. It was made of weathered wood, worn by time, but there was a faint glow around its edges, as though it too was alive, calling her forward. With a deep breath, Lyra stepped through. The world beyond the door was not what she had expected. She found herself standing on the edge of a cliff, the wind howling around her, carrying with it the scent of salt and earth. Below her, the ocean churned, crashing against jagged rocks, the waves rising and falling with a rhythm she could feel deep within her bones. It was a view unlike any she had seen before. The sky above was dark, swirling with storm clouds, but in the distance, a sliver of light pierced through the darkness. A path of light. A beacon. Lyra's gaze was drawn to it, her heart beating faster. It wasn't just a natural phenomenon, it was intentional. It was a call. The island had not just revealed its secrets. It had given her a choice. A path. Do you see it? A voice whispered, soft and familiar. Lyra spun around to find the keeper standing at her side, their presence calm and steady, as always. But this time, the keeper was different. They weren't just a guide. They were part of the island's truth. Part of its memory. You've reached the threshold, the keeper said, their voice carrying the weight of millennia. The island has shown you its heart, and now it is time for you to choose. Will you walk the path to the unknown, or will you return to the life you once knew? Lyra's breath caught in her throat. The question was simple, yet the weight of it was immense. She had felt the island's pulse, felt the deep connection between herself and the land. But what would it mean to step into the unknown? What would it mean to carry the island's power with her? I don't know if I'm ready, Lyra whispered, her voice shaking. What if I can't control it? What if the island's power changes me? The keeper's gaze softened. The island's power is not something to control. It is something to embrace. To become one with it, as you have become one with the island itself. But remember, not all paths are meant to be walked by the same person. The path you choose will shape you, just as you will shape it. Lyra looked out toward the sliver of light in the distance. The path was clear, but it was unknown. It was the final test, the point of no return. Her heart beat in time with the pulse of the island, steady and certain. She had already walked too far to turn back. I choose to walk the path, Lyra said, her voice firm with resolve. I choose to embrace the unknown. The keeper nodded. Then go. The island's heart will guide you. As she stepped forward, the ground beneath her feet seemed to shift. The cliff edge faded away, replaced by a path of light that stretched out before her. The air around her pulsed with energy, and the island's heartbeat resonated within her chest. The path ahead was not clear. It was not easy. But it was hers to walk. And as she took the first step into the unknown, Lyra felt the weight of the island's power settle within her, a part of her, forever. She had made her choice. And the journey had only just begun. Lyra's footsteps echoed softly as she walked along the illuminated path, the pulse of the island resonating beneath her feet. The light that stretched out before her was no ordinary glow, it was alive, humming with an energy that made the air crackle with anticipation. It wasn't just the light guiding her. It was the island itself, breathing with her, pushing her forward. The path seemed to stretch endlessly, but the light never wavered, always just ahead of her, beckoning her forward. The wind whispered through the trees on either side, their branches swaying as if they, too, were alive with the island's power. The deep, rhythmic pulse continued, its sound now so familiar to her that it felt like a part of her very being. Lyra couldn't shake the feeling that she was not just walking through Solmere's landscape, she was walking through time itself. The air was thick with memories, with echoes of those who had come before her, those who had walked this path and faced the same decision. The island had been a part of them, just as it was becoming a part of her. The path led her deeper into the heart of the island, where the trees grew taller, their trunks thick with age, their branches intertwining above her like a canopy of ancient wisdom. The mist, which had once been distant, now surrounded her completely. It clung to the trees, curling around the trunks like spectral arms. And somewhere in the distance, she could hear the faint sound of waves crashing against rocks, as though the island was calling her back to the ocean. She walked on, the path never faltering, until the mist began to clear. Up ahead, she saw a faint glow, the outline of something emerging from the shadows of the trees. As she approached, she realized what it was. A temple. It stood at the heart of the island, surrounded by thick stone columns that rose high into the sky. The stone was ancient, covered in vines and moss, but still standing strong, a testament to the island's timeless strength. At the top of the temple steps was a large, ornate door, its surface etched with more symbols: the spiral, the waves, the geometric shapes she had seen throughout her journey. But this door was different. It was not merely a symbol. It was a gateway. A choice. Lyra stopped at the base of the steps, her heart racing. She could feel the energy from the temple calling to her, urging her to step forward. But something in the back of her mind held her back. She had already made her choice. She had already chosen to walk this path. Yet, standing here, with the temple before her, she could feel the weight of what she was about to do. The island had revealed itself to her. The heart, the pulse, the power. She had embraced it, but now she had to face the ultimate test. What would this final step reveal? What would she uncover when the doors of this ancient temple opened? For a moment, she hesitated, but only for a moment. The choice was clear. She had come this far, and there was no turning back now. With a deep breath, Lyra climbed the stone steps, her hand brushing against the cold stone as she approached the massive door. The moment her fingers touched the surface, the door groaned, as though it had been waiting for her. Slowly, it began to open, revealing what lay beyond. A room, vast and circular, its walls lined with more of the same symbols, spirals, waves, geometric patterns, all intertwined and flowing together. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, much like the one in the temple, and on it lay a single object, a glowing crystal, its light soft but pulsing with the same rhythm she had felt throughout her journey. Lyra stepped forward, drawn to it, her heart racing in anticipation. This was it. The heart of the island. The source of the pulse. The object of her journey. But as her fingers neared the crystal, a voice echoed in her mind. A familiar voice, deep and ancient. The heart is not just an object, Lyra. It is a choice. You have chosen to walk this path, to embrace the island's power. But now, you must choose what to do with it. Lyra paused, her hand hovering just above the crystal. She could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her. What did it mean to carry the island's power with her? What would it cost her? Could she truly understand the implications of this choice? The voice continued. The power of the island is not something to be wielded lightly. It will shape you, and it will shape the world around you. Will you embrace it, or will you leave it behind, keeping the balance as it is? Lyra took a deep breath, her fingers brushing the surface of the crystal. The island's pulse, its power, seemed to surge through her, filling her with a sense of purpose and clarity. She understood now. The island had chosen her, and she had chosen to walk this path. But the question remained, what would she do with this power? Would she shape the world with it? Or would she protect the balance, leaving the island's heart untouched? She closed her eyes, letting the island's energy wash over her, feeling the weight of the decision settle in her chest. And then, with a steady hand, she took the crystal. The moment she touched it, the world around her seemed to shift. The room, the temple, the island, it all blurred, as though reality itself was bending and twisting. The energy in the air surged, and for a brief moment, Lyra felt as though she were everywhere and nowhere all at once. The pulse of the island, the heartbeat of Solmere, was inside her now, flowing through her veins, filling her with an ancient power. She gasped as the vision hit her, a flood of memories, images, and emotions. She saw the island in its prime, its lush forests, its hidden cities, and the guardians who had once protected it. She saw the darkness that had begun to creep into the heart of Solmere, the corruption that had twisted the island's power and turned the guardians into something else entirely. And then, she saw herself standing at the center of it all, the keeper of the island's pulse, the one who would shape its future. The vision faded, and Lyra opened her eyes, feeling the weight of the island's heart inside her. She had made her choice. She had embraced the power, and with it came a responsibility she had not fully understood until now. The path ahead was hers to walk. The island's pulse beat within her, but how she chose to use it, how she chose to shape the world with it, was up to her. The keeper's voice echoed in her mind once more. Now, you must decide. Will you protect the heart, or will you change the world? And Lyra, standing in the heart of Solmere, knew that whatever path she chose, she would never be the same again. Lyra stood still, her fingers still clasped around the glowing crystal, feeling the island's pulse reverberating within her chest. The power, the knowledge, and the responsibility now coursed through her veins like a river that could not be dammed. The chamber around her seemed to fade away, the symbols on the walls swirling with energy as though they were alive, breathing with her. She could feel the heartbeat of Solmere deep inside her, stronger than ever before. Now, you must decide. The keeper's voice echoed in her mind again, but this time, it was different. It wasn't just a question, it was a challenge. Lyra closed her eyes, her grip tightening around the crystal. The weight of the decision hung in the air, pressing on her chest. She had come to the island seeking answers, seeking peace, but she had found much more. She had found the island's heart, its power, its secrets, and now, she had to decide what to do with it. Would she protect it, keeping the balance of Solmere intact? Or would she use it, shaping the island and the world around her with its power? She could feel the pulse in her chest, slow and steady, like a metronome keeping time. It was a rhythm older than the world itself, older than the guardians who had once protected it, older than anything she had ever known. And it was now a part of her. The island's heart had chosen her, but she had to choose it in return. She turned and walked out of the chamber, the crystal still glowing in her hand. The temple around her was silent, the echoes of her footsteps the only sound in the stillness. The light from the crystal illuminated the stone walls, casting long, wavering shadows that seemed to shift as if they had a life of their own. Her mind was racing. The power she held was immense. The possibilities were endless. She could heal the land, restore it to its former glory, protect it from the corruption that had tainted it in the past. Or she could use its power to reshape the world beyond Solmere, to rewrite the course of history, to bring about a new era. The weight of it all pressed down on her. She had come here looking for answers, but now she was faced with a question that no one could answer for her. It was her choice. And it would define everything. She passed through the stone archway and stepped out into the open air. The wind carried the scent of pine and salt, the sky above a deep, endless blue. The world outside the temple felt unchanged, but she knew that she was not the same. The island had given her its heart, and now it was up to her to decide how to carry it. She walked toward the edge of the cliff, where the ocean stretched out before her, vast and unending. The waves crashed against the rocks below, their rhythm steady and unyielding, like the pulse of the island itself. The island has shown you its truth, the keeper's voice whispered once more. Now, you must decide if you will embrace it or leave it behind. Lyra looked out at the horizon, feeling the weight of the island's power in her chest. The choice was hers. The days that followed were filled with quiet contemplation. Lyra walked the island, visiting the places she had once explored, but with new eyes. The forests, the beaches, the hidden corners of Solmere, they all felt different now. The island was alive in a way she had never understood before. She could feel its pulse in the trees, in the earth beneath her feet, in the wind that rustled through the leaves. She visited the hollow pines, the ruins of the ancient city, the lighthouse by the shore. Everywhere she went, she could feel the heartbeat of Solmere, the rhythm of the land, the power that flowed through it all. And with each step, she felt herself becoming more attuned to it, more connected to the island's pulse. The choice was still there, looming in the distance. But the more she walked, the more she realized something. The power of the island wasn't something to be used. It wasn't something to be controlled. It was something to be protected. Solmere was not just a place, it was a living entity, a heartbeat that connected everything. The island had chosen her, but in turn, she had chosen to protect it, to keep its balance intact. The pulse of the island was not hers to bend, to reshape, to wield. It was hers to safeguard, to nurture. As she stood on the edge of the cliffs once more, the wind tugging at her hair, Lyra made her decision. She would carry the island's heart within her, but she would not use it to change the world. Instead, she would protect it. She would ensure that the island's pulse remained steady, that its power remained untouched by those who would seek to exploit it. Her journey had led her here, to this moment, and she had come to understand what the island had always known, that power was not meant to be wielded, but to be honored. Lyra returned to the temple, where the heart of Solmere still rested, its glow now dimming as if the island itself had accepted her decision. She placed the crystal back on the pedestal, its light fading to a soft, steady glow. It was no longer a source of power to be controlled, it was a part of the island's memory, a symbol of the bond between the land and its people. She stepped back, feeling the pulse of the island in her chest, steady and calm. She had made her choice. And with it, she had chosen her place in the world. The keeper appeared beside her, silent as always, watching her with knowing eyes. "You have chosen," the keeper said softly. "The island's pulse will continue, and you will continue with it." Lyra nodded, a sense of peace settling over her. The island was not hers to change, but hers to protect. And that was enough. She turned toward the horizon, the world stretching out before her, and took a deep breath, feeling the pulse of the island steady within her. The journey was far from over. But it was no longer about seeking answers. It was about understanding the balance and keeping it intact. With that understanding, Lyra stepped forward into the future, knowing that the island would always be a part of her, and she a part of it. The journey had begun. And the path, though unknown, was hers to walk. The wind had shifted, and with it came a sense of newness that filled the air. The island felt more alive than ever before, as if the very earth itself was breathing, rising and falling with the rhythm of the pulse that had been passed to Lyra. She could feel the island's presence within her, the connection more profound than anything she had ever known. It was not just a place she had visited anymore, it was part of her, a part of her soul woven into the fabric of the land. Lyra's decision to protect the island's heart had altered the course of her journey, but it had also deepened her understanding of the island's true purpose. She had not sought to control the power she had felt, but instead to preserve it, to ensure that it would continue to pulse with life, that it would remain untouched by the greed and corruption that had tainted it in the past. But the journey was far from over. As she walked the familiar paths of Solmere once again, she could feel a new path unfolding before her, one that had always been there but had only now begun to reveal itself. The island had shown her its past, its present, and its heart. But it was the future that now called to her. Her footsteps carried her deeper into the forest, where the trees grew tall and ancient, their trunks wrapped in thick vines. The mist had returned, curling around the trees like a living entity, but it no longer felt ominous. It was gentle now, soft and guiding, like the island itself was whispering to her, urging her forward. She had visited the ruins of the ancient city before, but this time, it felt different. The air was thick with the scent of history, and as she stood at the edge of the crumbled walls, she felt the weight of all that had come before her. The island's guardians had once stood here, watching over the heart, protecting it from those who would seek to exploit its power. But they had fallen, one by one, their minds twisted by the very force they had sworn to protect. Lyra knew that the island had not chosen her by chance. She had been chosen because she understood. She understood the importance of balance, of preservation, and of the delicate thread that connected everything. The wind whispered through the trees, and Lyra closed her eyes for a moment, listening. The pulse of the island was steady, like a heartbeat, but it was not just a physical beat, it was the rhythm of the land itself, the heartbeat of the world. The future was unfolding before her, a thread that she now had the power to shape. It was not a path she could walk alone, but it was one that she could guide. She felt the presence of others, the guardians of the island's heart, the ones who would walk beside her. She had seen their visions, felt their call, and now she knew that they were waiting. Lyra opened her eyes and looked out at the horizon. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm, golden light across the island. She could feel the pulse of the land beneath her feet, and with it, a new sense of purpose. The future of Solmere rested in her hands. But it was not just her future, it was the future of the island, the future of all those who would come after her. She was ready. Days passed, each one filled with quiet reflection and exploration. Lyra visited the places she had once known, the hidden corners of the island where the pulse of Solmere was strongest. She felt the presence of the guardians, their spirits woven into the very fabric of the land, and she knew that she was not alone. The keeper's words still lingered in her mind: you must choose what to do with the power you have inherited. Will you walk the path of balance, or will you shape the island's future? Lyra had chosen balance. She had chosen to protect the island's heart, to keep its power safe and pure. But that didn't mean she couldn't shape the future. The island had shown her its past, its heart, and its pulse, and now it was time for her to forge her own path, one that would lead to a future where the island's secrets remained preserved, its heart untouched by the forces that would seek to change it. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Lyra stood on the cliffs once more, looking out at the sea. The pulse of the island was stronger than ever, its rhythm steady and constant. And she felt it in her chest, a beat that matched her own. She had found her place here. She had found her purpose. The guardians would guide her, as they had guided those who came before. And together, they would ensure that the island's heart remained safe, that its pulse continued to beat, steady and strong, for generations to come. The future was hers to shape. And with the island's heart within her, she would ensure that it would be a future built on balance, on understanding, and on the preservation of the land she had come to love. Lyra turned from the sea and walked back toward the temple, the path now clear before her. She had embraced the island's heart. And now, it was time for her to begin the next chapter of her journey. The island's pulse beat steadily, and with it, Lyra's own heart beat in rhythm. The future was alive. And she was ready to walk its path. Lyra's feet moved swiftly across the soft ground as she made her way back to the heart of Solmere. Each step felt more certain than the last, a rhythmic beat aligning with the pulse that coursed through her veins. The island's call had become unmistakable, clear, and vibrant, pulling her toward the temple once again. She could feel it in the air, an energy, a weight, a promise that had always been there but now had taken root within her. She had embraced the island's heart, and the island had embraced her. But as she walked the familiar path toward the temple, a new feeling stirred within her, a sense of responsibility, of purpose. The island had chosen her as its protector, but she knew that it wasn't enough just to safeguard the heart. The island's future, its very existence, depended on more than just preservation. She had to act, to lead the way for the guardians who would come after her. And the guardians weren't just spirits of the past. They were real. They were waiting for her. Their presence lingered in the air, in the rustling of the trees, in the song of the wind. They had always been a part of the island's pulse, woven into its very fabric, and now it was time for her to seek them out. The temple stood before her once again, its ancient stone walls bathed in the soft glow of twilight. The heavy doors opened with ease, as though they had been waiting for her, and Lyra stepped inside, the echo of her footsteps a steady rhythm in the vast silence. At the center of the room stood the pedestal, the same one where she had placed the heart of Solmere. But this time, it wasn't just the crystal she had left behind. It was a new beginning, a choice to embrace not only the island's power but also the responsibility that came with it. The room was empty, but the energy in the air was palpable, like the space itself was holding its breath. Lyra stood still for a moment, her eyes closed, feeling the pulse of the island coursing through her. She could hear it now, clearer than ever, the hum of the earth beneath her feet, the beating of the heart within her chest, the island's breath mingling with her own. "Guardians," she whispered, the words slipping from her lips like a prayer. "I have come." For a moment, there was nothing. The room remained still, and the air grew thick with anticipation. But then, a soft glow began to fill the space, emanating from the stone walls, from the very earth beneath her. The glow grew brighter, casting long shadows, and then, from the corners of the room, figures began to emerge. Lyra's heart skipped a beat as the first guardian stepped forward, tall and regal, their form bathed in light. The guardian's features were indistinct, their face hidden beneath a hood, but their presence was undeniable. They carried a staff made of twisted wood, wrapped in vines, and their movements were slow and deliberate. The others followed, more guardians, each one different, yet all sharing the same ethereal glow. They stood before Lyra, silent and still, as if waiting for her to make the first move. She could feel their eyes on her, even though she could not see their faces. Their presence was like a weight, but it was not heavy. It was a presence of authority, of wisdom, and of power. Lyra, one of the guardians, spoke, their voice like a whisper in the wind, "You have come to awaken us. But you must understand, the path you walk now is not one of power alone. It is a path of sacrifice, of balance, and of choice." Lyra swallowed, her throat dry, but she stood firm. "I understand. I have seen the island's truth. I have felt its pulse. And I have chosen to protect it." The guardian nodded, their form shimmering with light. "You are the island's heart now, Lyra. But you are not alone in this. We are the guardians of Solmere. We were chosen to protect its power, and now, we will walk with you. But remember, the heart must remain pure. If it is tainted, the island will wither. It is a delicate balance." Lyra stepped forward, her heart racing, but her steps were sure. "What must I do?" The guardians moved in unison, their robes flowing with the movement, and one by one, they placed their hands on the pedestal, where the heart of Solmere had once rested. The crystal, still glowing faintly, pulsed in response, its light flickering as the guardians chanted in a language that Lyra couldn't understand. It was a language older than the island itself, filled with power and resonance, and as they spoke, the ground beneath Lyra's feet began to hum. The air grew thick, the energy in the room intensifying, and the pulse of the island resonated with the chant, deepening in rhythm. The light from the crystal grew brighter, illuminating the room in a blaze of radiant energy. Lyra felt the power surge through her, the island's heart beating in her chest, syncing with the chant of the guardians. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, the light dimmed, and the room fell into silence once more. The guardians stepped back, their forms fading slightly, their glow dimming to a soft pulse. "You are ready," one of the guardians spoke again, their voice calm and steady. "But now, you must choose your first step. The island's balance is fragile. There are forces that will try to corrupt it, to twist its power for their own gain." Lyra nodded, feeling the weight of their words. She had felt the island's power, had seen its beauty and its danger. She understood the responsibility that had been placed upon her shoulders. "What must I do?" she asked again, her voice steady, filled with determination. The guardian with the staff stepped forward, raising the staff high, and as they did, a burst of energy shot through the air, crackling with power. The stone walls trembled, and the ground beneath her feet shook. Lyra's heart raced as the energy surged around her, but the guardian's voice was calm, cutting through the chaos. "Find the source of the darkness," the guardian said, their voice clear, "the corruption that seeks to twist the island's heart. You will find it in the depths, beneath the mountains, where the ancient ruins lie. There, you will face the truth of Solmere's past. And you will make your choice. Lyra stood tall, her chest rising and falling with the weight of her resolve. The path was set. She knew what she had to do. The guardians were with her, but the journey ahead would not be easy. The island had revealed its heart, its secrets, but now, it was time for her to confront its darkness. She turned toward the temple door, the way ahead clear. The pulse of the island resonated in her chest, guiding her steps, and she felt the weight of her decision settle in her heart. She was ready. She would find the darkness, confront it, and protect the island's heart. The guardians watched her silently, their presence a steady force, and with one final glance back at them, Lyra stepped into the unknown. The path to the ruins was treacherous, the land shifting beneath her feet, but Lyra pressed on. The pulse of the island continued to guide her, its rhythm steady and unwavering. She was not alone. The guardians would walk with her in spirit. And she would walk the path to the heart of Solmere, where its true test awaited her. Lyra walked for what seemed like days, though the passage of time was indistinct in the shifting landscape of the island. The deeper she traveled, the more the island seemed to change, its very essence warping around her. The trees grew sparse, their trunks twisted and gnarled, their branches reaching out like crooked fingers. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and something darker, more unsettling. The pulse of the island was still with her, but now it felt distant, faint as though something was standing between her and its rhythm. She reached the edge of a dark forest, the shadows growing longer with each step. The path ahead was barely visible, overgrown with vines and thorns, but she could see the faint glow of the ancient ruins just beyond. The ruins had always been a place of mystery and power, hidden from the world for centuries, but she knew now that they held the key to the island's true darkness. As she stepped into the clearing, the ground beneath her feet trembled. The ruins loomed before her, their stones blackened with age, the once grand structures now crumbling under the weight of time. She could feel the pulse here too, but it was wrong. It was twisted, a discordant rhythm that made her skin crawl. The guardians had warned her. The darkness had been here long before she arrived. It had waited in the depths of Solmere, hidden beneath the earth, waiting for someone to come and awaken it. She pressed on, her hand tight around the crystal she had kept with her. It glowed faintly, its warmth a steady reminder of the power she now carried. The guardians had told her to seek out the source of the corruption, to find the heart of the darkness and face it head on. But as she moved deeper into the ruins, the air grew heavier, thick with the weight of ancient memories. She passed through a broken archway, its once ornate carvings now barely recognizable. The path ahead was a winding tunnel, the walls slick with moisture, and the sound of dripping water echoed in the distance. She could feel the darkness pressing in around her, suffocating, like a thick fog that refused to lift. And then she saw it. At the end of the tunnel stood a massive stone door, its surface covered in more of the twisted symbols she had seen in the ruins. The door was cracked, ancient and worn, but it pulsed with an energy that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. The darkness was on the other side, waiting. Lyra hesitated for a moment, her breath coming in shallow gasps. She knew that this was the moment she had been preparing for the final test. But even as she reached out to touch the door, she could feel the weight of her choice settling in her chest. What if she wasn't ready? What if the power she had embraced was not enough? She pushed the door open with a slow, steady motion, the stone grinding against itself with a sound that echoed through the tunnel. The darkness beyond was thick, almost tangible, and the air grew colder as she stepped into the chamber. At the center of the room stood a pedestal, its surface covered in intricate carvings. And on the pedestal lay the source of the corruption, a blackened crystal, its surface cracked and dark, pulsing with an ominous energy. The heart of the darkness, the thing that had tainted the island's pulse, that had twisted its rhythm and threatened to destroy everything. Lyra felt her heart race as she approached the pedestal, the darkness pressing in from all sides. She could feel the corruption in the air, like a poison that was slowly seeping into her own soul. The crystal seemed to call to her, its dark energy pulling at her, tempting her to take it, to use its power. But as she stood there, on the brink of temptation, the pulse of the island's heart thudded in her chest once more, steady and strong. It was a reminder. A reminder that she was not just a vessel for the island's power. She was its protector. Lyra closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She knew what she had to do. She couldn't allow the darkness to take root here. Not now, not ever. With a steady hand, she reached for the blackened crystal. As her fingers made contact, a surge of dark energy exploded through her, overwhelming her senses. Her body trembled as the power coursed through her, threatening to tear her apart. The darkness whispered to her, offering her power, offering her control over the island itself. It promised her the ability to reshape the world, to bend it to her will. But Lyra resisted. She remembered the pulse, the rhythm that had kept the island alive, that had kept her grounded. She remembered the guardians, the responsibility they had entrusted her with. This was not about control. It was about balance. With a final, forceful motion, Lyra grasped the crystal and pulled it from the pedestal. The darkness screamed in her mind, its furious storm of voices and images, but she held on. She could feel the weight of it, the power of it, but she knew that this was the moment of choice. She had to decide. With a cry, Lyra lifted the crystal high, and as she did, the island's pulse surged through her once more, stronger than ever before. She could feel the rhythm of the heart, the power of the land, filling her, pushing the darkness out. The crystal in her hand began to crack, its dark energy being consumed by the light of the island's heart. The darkness screamed again, but this time, it was fading. The crystal shattered in her hand, and the blackened energy dissipated into the air like smoke. The room fell silent. Lyra collapsed to her knees, her body trembling from the effort. She could feel the weight of the island's pulse still inside her, but it was different now. It was steady, balanced, free from the corruption that had threatened to consume it. And as she looked around the room, she knew that the darkness had been defeated. The heart of Solmere was safe. The island was safe. But the journey was far from over. The days that followed were filled with quiet reflection. The island's pulse had returned to its natural rhythm, and Lyra knew that her work was not yet finished. There were still forces at play, still remnants of the darkness that sought to destroy everything the island stood for. But Lyra was no longer afraid. She had embraced the island's power, and with it, she had found her purpose. She was the protector of Solmere's heart, the guardian of its pulse. And as long as she walked its paths, the island's rhythm would continue, steady and strong. She turned back toward the temple, the door now sealed behind her, knowing that the next chapter of her journey had already begun. The island's heart beat on. And so would she. The sun had begun to rise over the horizon when Lyra left the temple, her heart still heavy with the weight of her choice. The darkness had been driven from Solmere, but the island's pulse, its rhythm, was forever changed. She had made her decision, and the consequences of that decision would reverberate throughout the island. But what would the future hold? Lyra walked through the dense forest, the light filtering through the canopy of trees above her, casting long shadows across the forest floor. She could feel the energy of the island beneath her feet, the power of the land coursing through her like a river. The path ahead was uncertain, but she knew it would lead her to places she had yet to understand. The pulse of Solmere had become part of her, and with it came a new understanding, a new sense of purpose. She was not just the island's protector. She was its guardian, its heartbeat. But the island's balance was fragile. It needed more than just her. It needed the guardians who had come before, the ones who had once stood at the heart of Solmere, protecting its secrets from those who sought to control it. Lyra knew that she could not walk this path alone. As she ventured deeper into the forest, she felt a pull in the air, a soft, insistent whisper that seemed to call to her from the trees. It was the same sensation she had felt before, when the guardians had first appeared to her. But now, the pull was stronger, more urgent. It was as though the island itself was guiding her towards something or someone. She walked on, the whispers growing louder in her mind, and soon, she reached a clearing. At the center of the clearing stood an ancient stone circle, its surface worn smooth by centuries of time. The air was thick with energy, a palpable force that crackled around her. The guardians were here. Lyra stepped forward, her hand instinctively reaching for the crystal that still rested in her pocket. As she touched it, a surge of power shot through her, and the stone circle before her began to glow with a soft, golden light. The guardians had awoken. One by one, the figures emerged from the shadows of the trees, their forms shimmering with a faint ethereal glow. Each guardian was different, but all shared the same energy, the same pulse that Lyra had felt from the moment she first set foot on the island. They were not just protectors. They were the island's heartbeat, woven into the fabric of its being. The first guardian stepped forward, their presence commanding and powerful. They were tall and regal, their face obscured by a hood, but their eyes gleamed with ancient knowledge. "You have done it," the guardian said, their voice deep and resonant, like the sound of distant thunder. You have awakened the island's heart. And with it, you have awakened us. Lyra stood still, her heart racing. I couldn't have done it alone, she said, her voice steady but filled with awe. I need your guidance. The guardian nodded. We are here. We have always been here. But now, we are bound to you. Together, we will protect the heart of Solmere, for the balance of this land is fragile. And there are those who seek to disrupt it. Lyra felt a shiver run down her spine as the words sank in. She had sensed the darkness before, felt its pull on the island. But now, with the guardians beside her, she understood the true extent of the threat. The island's pulse was strong, but there were forces that were older than the island itself that would stop at nothing to control it. We must be vigilant, the guardian continued, their voice a low murmur in the air. The heart of Solmere is not just a source of power. It is the key to everything. And those who seek to control it will stop at nothing. Lyra nodded, the weight of the responsibility settling in her chest. The island had chosen her, but it had also entrusted her with the protection of its heart, of its pulse. And with that trust came the understanding that she would have to fight not just for the island, but for the future of everything it stood for. As the other guardians gathered around her, their presence filling the clearing with a quiet, steady power, Lyra felt the pulse of Solmere within her stronger than ever before. The guardians would be her allies, her protectors, but it was up to her to lead them. We must find the source of the darkness, Lyra said, her voice firm. We must stop it before it can spread. I won't let it destroy Solmere. The guardians exchanged looks, their eyes filled with understanding. They, too, had felt the pull of the darkness, the presence that threatened to undo everything the island had built. We will help you, the first guardian said. But know this, the path ahead will not be easy. The darkness you seek to destroy is not just a force, it is a part of this land. It has been here since the beginning. And only by understanding its origins can we hope to defeat it. Lyra nodded, determination filling her chest. She had come so far, and she would not back down now. The island had given her its heart, and now it was time for her to protect it. She turned to the guardians, her voice resolute. Then let's begin, she said. We have a future to protect. The guardians nodded in unison, their forms glowing brighter as they gathered around her. Together, they would seek out the source of the darkness, the corruption that threatened to tear the island apart. And with the pulse of Solmere guiding them, they would not rest until the heart was safe. The journey ahead was uncertain, but Lyra was no longer afraid. She had embraced the island's power, and with it, she had found her place among the guardians. Together, they would uncover the truth of Solmere's past, face the darkness that lurked in its depths, and protect the pulse that sustained everything. With the guardians at her side, Lyra walked into the unknown, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The island's pulse beat steadily in her chest. And together, they would keep it alive. The days had passed quickly in the company of the guardians, each day spent uncovering more of the island's forgotten secrets. The pulse of Solmere was stronger within her now, a steady rhythm that Lyra could feel at all times. It was a part of her heartbeat syncing with the islands, the pulse of the land, the ocean, the very soul of Solmere. She could feel its power, its history, its very essence. But with that power came a weight, a responsibility that she could not ignore. As the guardians had warned, the path ahead would not be easy. The darkness that threatened Solmere was not just a shadow lurking in the corners of the island. It was something much older, more ingrained in the fabric of the land itself. The guardians had taught her much about the history of the island, about the forces that had shaped it, but there was one thing they had not told her. The source of the darkness lay beneath the waves. It was an ancient, hidden temple, lost beneath the ocean for centuries. The island's history told of a time when the heart of Solmere had been almost destroyed, when the darkness had consumed everything, and the island's pulse had nearly faltered. The temple had been sealed away, hidden beneath the waves to protect it from the forces that sought to control it. But now, the darkness had begun to stir again, and the only way to stop it was to face the source head-on. Lyra knew what she had to do. She had to dive beneath the waves, to the very heart of the island's forgotten past, and confront the darkness before it consumed everything. The journey to the edge of the island was long. The guardians had helped her prepare, giving her the tools she would need to survive in the depths. They had warned her that the water was not just cold, it was ancient, filled with memories and powers that could not be understood by mortal minds. The pulse of the island was strongest near the shore, but the depths held something else, something that had been buried for centuries. As Lyra stood on the edge of the cliff, looking out over the vast expanse of ocean, she could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her. The guardians had told her that the temple lay beneath the ocean's depths, but they could not follow her. The darkness was something that only she could face. It was her responsibility. With a final, deep breath, Lyra stepped forward, her feet sinking into the soft sand. The ocean stretched out before her, dark and infinite, the waves crashing against the shore in a rhythm as old as the island itself. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden glow over the water, but she could already feel the chill of the ocean seeping into her bones. She waded into the water, the cold quickly engulfing her as she swam out further. Her heart raced in her chest, not from fear, but from the knowledge that this was it, the moment that would determine the future of Solmere. The guardian's words echoed in her mind, their final warning before she had set out on this journey: only you can face the darkness. Only you can stop it. The further she swam, the darker the water became. It was no longer just the physical weight of the ocean pressing against her, it was the history, the ancient memories of the island, pressing in from all sides. Lyra could feel the pulse of the island, but now, it was faint, like a whisper beneath the water's surface. As she swam deeper, the ocean seemed to open up around her, as if she were passing through an invisible barrier. The water around her began to glow, a faint, eerie light emanating from the depths. It was not the light of the sun. It was something else, something ancient. And then, through the darkness, she saw it. The temple, It rose from the ocean floor like a forgotten monument, its stone walls covered in coral and seaweed. The structure was massive, its shape obscured by the water, but Lyra could feel its presence. It was ancient, older than anything she had ever seen. The pulse of the island, which had once been so steady in her chest, now throbbed in time with the heart of the temple itself. Lyra took a deep breath and dug deeper, the water growing colder and darker as she descended. She could feel the pressure building around her, the weight of the ocean pressing in from all sides. But she didn't stop. The temple was closed now. She could see the entrance, a large archway carved with the same symbols she had seen throughout the island. The spiral, the waves, the geometric patterns. She reached the entrance and pushed herself through, the water parting around her as she entered the temple. Inside, the air was thick with power, the water swirling around her like a living thing. The temple's walls were covered in more symbols, more spirals, more waves, more patterns. But now, they seemed to pulse with life, their glow faint but undeniable. The deeper she swam into the temple, the more she felt the presence of the darkness, the weight of the power that had been sealed away for so long. At the center of the temple was a stone pedestal, and upon it lay the source of the darkness, a blackened crystal, its surface cracked and broken. The energy radiating from it was unlike anything Lyra had ever felt before. It was cold, sharp, and filled with a dark, malevolent force that threatened to consume everything. Lyra reached out, her hand trembling as she touched the crystal. The moment her fingers made contact, a surge of power shot through her, overwhelming her senses. The water around her churned violently, the darkness swirling like a storm. The pulse of the island faltered, its rhythm disrupted by the dark energy radiating from the crystal. And then, she heard it. A voice, deep and ancient, rising from the depths of the temple. "You cannot stop me." The darkness surged, and the water around her seemed to collapse inward, closing around her. Lyra gasped for air, her heart racing in her chest. The crystal in her hand pulsed, its energy growing stronger, more intense. But even as the darkness threatened to overwhelm her, Lyra held on. She could feel the pulse of Solmere, faint but steady, beating in time with her own heart. It was there, beneath the darkness, beneath the corruption. It was waiting for her to act. With a final, desperate push, Lyra willed the crystal to respond. She felt the island's pulse in her chest, steady and sure, and she poured that power into the crystal. The darkness writhed in her grasp, but she didn't let go. And then, with a final burst of energy, the crystal shattered, its dark power dissipating into the water, consumed by the light of the island's heart. For a moment, there was silence. The water stilled, the pulse of the island returning to its steady rhythm, calm and true. The temple around her seemed to breathe with a renewed life, the darkness vanished once more. Lyra floated in the stillness, the weight of the moment settling over her. She had done it. The darkness had been defeated. The island's heart was safe. And as she looked up toward the surface, the sunlight breaking through the water, she knew that her journey was far from over. The island's pulse would continue, and so would she. The guardians had given her their trust. The island had given her its heart. And now, it was time to protect it. The sun had fully risen by the time Lyra emerged from the depths of the temple, the weight of her journey slowly settling into her bones. She surfaced, her body aching, but the water around her now felt lighter, as if the island itself had released the breath it had been holding for centuries. The pulse of Solmere had returned to its steady rhythm, the darkness finally eradicated, and with it, the island was whole again. Lyra gasped for air, her lungs filling with the clean, crisp oxygen of the morning. The sunlight broke through the clouds, casting warm golden rays over the ocean, and for the first time in days, the air felt right pure, untainted by the shadows that had once threatened to consume it. She swam toward the shore, her movements slow but sure, the soft rhythm of the waves guiding her. As she reached the land, she felt the island's heartbeat still pulsing within her, steady and calm, a reminder of all that had been saved. The crystal, once dark and cracked, was no more. Its power had been released, absorbed into the island's rhythm, making it whole once again. Stepping onto the sand, Lyra looked out over the vast ocean, her heart swelling with a sense of completion. The guardians had been right. She had not only come to protect the heart of Solmere, she had come to preserve its pulse, its very essence. And now, the island was at peace. As she stood there, the guardians appeared once more, their ethereal forms shimmering like the morning light. They surrounded her, their presence gentle but firm, like a silent promise. "You have done it," the first guardian said, their voice soft, like the rustle of leaves in the wind. "You have returned Solmere to its heart. The island is safe. Its pulse will continue, steady and true." Lyra nodded, her heart full, but the weight of their words settled into her chest. "It was never just about the power," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "It was about balance. About remembering that we are all connected to this place." The guardians watched her silently, their eyes though hidden glowing with quiet approval. They stepped forward, one by one, placing their hands on her shoulders in a silent gesture of gratitude and respect. "You have chosen wisely," the second guardian said. "And in doing so, you have chosen your place in the island's story." Lyra closed her eyes, letting their words wash over her. The island's pulse had become a part of her, its rhythm syncing with her heart. She had come to Solmere seeking answers, but she had found something far greater. She had found her purpose. The guardians stepped back, and the light from the sun seemed to grow brighter, as if the island itself was honoring her decision. The pulse of Solmere, steady and true, filled the air, surrounding her with the energy of the land, the sea, and the sky. "Now, go," the first guardian said. "Your journey is not over. The island's heart will continue to beat through you, but there are others who will need you. The future of Solmere, of all the lands, is in your hands." Lyra nodded, the weight of their words settling into her heart. She had made her choice, and now, it was time to walk forward, to continue the journey that would carry her beyond the shores of Solmere. With a final glance at the Guardians, Lyra turned toward the horizon, the island's pulse still resonating within her chest. She could feel the island's energy, its history, and its future all within her, all guiding her forward. As she walked away from the beach, the first steps of a new journey ahead of her, Lyra smiled. She wasn't just a protector of the island anymore. She was a part of it, a part of its heart, its pulse, its story. And as the sun began to set over Solmere, the pulse of the island beat steady and strong, in rhythm with the beating of her own heart. For the island had found its guardian. And the guardian had found her home.